Good evening and welcome to The Big Fight, a show that is young at 22, the oldest running debate show on Indian news television. I'm Sanket. Now last week, the utterances of BJP spokespersons Nupur, Sharma and Naveen, Jindal created an international uproar. India was questioned by Muslim nations, and 10 days after those comments to a private TV station, the BJP took action, sacked its commentators. But since then, another polarized debate on hate speech has begun. An FIR has been lodged not just against BJP's own, but it has a great number of others as well. The Delhi police is being accused of indulging in a balancing act. This includes Mr. Asaduddin Owaisi also. Many people in the TV space and even otherwise say that whoever will spew venom and spread hate, action will be taken. Now today's show is a little different though, associated but different. You see, all of this starts because hate has become normalized on television news. Day in and day out. Dial a comment Maulanas, which are also in television lingo called dial-a-bite Maulanas and dial-a-bite Pundits, come to TV studios, sit in the guest relations room, share some small talk, and then the moment the camera says action, all hell breaks loose. And as soon as the debate ends, the Maulana and Pandit, they exchange pleasantries, have tea, invite one another to functions, sometimes even share the same cab back to their respective destinations. We call this the hate for profit media fix match. It may appear comical, but this is no joke because the impact to the society is devastating. So while we take action against the motormouths, how about reining in hate for profit media, which has normalized hate? In the name of free speech, should hate debates and hate news be normalized in this country? A casual abuse here or there, a casual slap here or there, a casual assault here or there, a casual insult here or there. Let's nip it in the bud. End this fixed match in the hate for profit media. Let me kickstart this discussion. This is a very important discussion that we are having on The Big Fight. Shivam Vij is the contributing editor of The Print. Dr. Sumant C. Raman, political analyst and a commentator. Kota Nilima, author and a researcher, has done a great degree of work on hate for profit media. Sudhendra Kulkarni, noted author and columnist. Jaideep Mazumdar, associate editor of the Swaraj magazine. Deshatan Nigam, political analyst, supports the RSS and the BJP, is also a noted lawyer of the Supreme Court. Thank you very much. Let's begin with what we call is the first punch, where all of you get uninterrupted 1 minute time for your opening comments. Shivam Vij, will begin with you. Your time starts now.
Hi Sanket, thank you for having this very important discussion. I think you will remember that some time ago in 2019, an Indian news channel was briefly taken off air and fined around £20,000 in UK by the UK broadcasting regulator called Ofcom, or the Office of Communications. And part of their brief, Ofcom's brief, is to look at hate speech. My very simple question is it not time for us to have an autonomous, independent broadcasting regulator? Because clearly self-regulation has failed. Self-regulation on Indian news TV has failed. At the same time, I'm not asking for active intervention of the INB ministry on every single debate, because that will raise issues of censorship and political and politicization. I'm asking for an independent regulator for TV news made by a law of parliament, headed by maybe retired Supreme Court judges, to look at these issues, because all sides claim there is hate speech. It's not one side. So let an independent regulator legally assess claims of hate speech.
Okay.
And if a channel errs, then fine them. If there is a Maulana or Pandit, as you were rightly saying, who regularly offends because that is his job, right? That is why he gets invited on TV.
Yeah.
Then the regulator can say this guy cannot be invited on any debate.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I'm going to come back to you, Shivam Vij. Your 1 minute time is over, and it's interesting that you came up with suggestions, because we are going to divide this this debate and this discussion on identifying the problem, which I think is fairly self-explanatory, and then also offering solutions according to you guys, moral, ethical solutions and legal solutions. Right now, what Shivam Vij has suggested is an important regulatory solution. Now, whether that will work or not, or will that create a sort of a super cop on all television channels, because that has been the contention each time there is a conversation on there being a regulator. Some opening comments of everyone. Dr. Sumant C. Raman.
Yeah. Sanket, the fundamental thing that we need to understand is that hate speech in India today has started to pay. Now, who is it paying for? It is paying for those who indulge in hate speech. It is paying off for the channels who are broadcasting these hate speech contests almost on a daily basis. And it is also paying off for a selected group of politicians who benefit from the result of hate speech. So the first objective should be to try to see how we can make hate speech not, hate speech has to have a price. It should not be profitable. So that is a fundamental issue that we need to look at. What happens? Why do people want to say outrageous things on television? They want to say it because A, it gets them noticed within a particular political party or an entity or an organization, which then enables them to climb the political ladder. Look at the perversity of this. Somebody who makes such statements should actually be punished by the party. Unfortunately, they are being rewarded by the parties. They are being rewarded by the organizations with greater positions of power and influence, and that is the fundamental issue. If hate speech was not good for your political career, if hate speech was not profitable for you, I don't see anybody wanting to indulge in hate speech. So I think we need to tackle those two issues. And certainly the mainstream media is to a very large extent culpable, because they are laughing all the way to the bank, allowing these hate speeches. At the same time, the only ones who lose are the people of this country. And that equation has to change.
Okay, 1 minute opening time is over. So you're saying that basically this incentive around spreading hate has to go, and it should be punishable, not profitable. I think that's an important point that has been made. Ms. Kota Neelima.
Thank you, Sanket, and thank you for giving us a glimpse of what happens beyond the cameras in a studio between a Maulana and a Pandit. This kind of information is not accessible to the audience, so that's a very important opening remark by you. One important thing is that why would governments regulate anything which helps them to distract and divert from issues which are going to land them in trouble? For instance, the kind of research we have done is about 3 lakh seconds of footage on just the coverage during the days when there was a price hike or on fuel and LPG. And we see that never more than 10% of time on any prime time debate, this is like dozens of channels across the country we studied, was given to the issues of price rise or the LPG fuel hike on particular days. We have that data. Now, why would government? They have a vested interest in the communal agenda. That is something which we see. Now, what is to be done is obviously empower the audience so they understand that this is the agenda which is being pushed, and they do not respond to it in the kind of polarization we see in the society and the nation. That I think is very essential, and that's exactly what
we'll discuss the problem and the solutions in greater detail as we go along. Opening comments of Mr. Sudhindra Kulkarni now. Your first punch, Mr. Kulkarni.
Sanket, there has never been so much degeneration in the Indian media as we have seen in the last 8 years. And all this is happening because of a very conscious decision by the government of the day to polarize society and use the media for this purpose. Of course, there are honorable exceptions like NDTV, but there are many television channels in Hindi, English too, and regional languages that have become the handmaiden of the ruling party to advance its political agenda, to divide society, to create hate. And it's not hate for profit, it is poison for profit. They're spreading poison. If someone were to sell poison as Amrit, let's say, the Food and Drug Administration of the country would immediately haul them up, jail them. But no action is being taken against these peddlers of poison
for profit media. I think that's a new word. That's a new word Mr. Kulkarni has coined, because we strongly stand against hate for profit media. And I think we are far beyond hate now. This is poisonous. Jaideep Mazumdar, your opening comments, sir.
I will go a step further from what Shivam has said. And I would say, like, impose very, very strong penalties on not only on the TV channels, but also on the people who appear on the TV channels and indulge in sort of hateful speech, which is extremely hurtful, many communities, sections of society, etc. And the body, the regulatory body that Shiva was talking about, in order to have checks and balances, maybe have a parliamentary committee comprising all political parties to oversee the and the judiciary as well, to oversee the committee. But the first thing is not only to just mere penalties won't help. If you just to take a case, like if you impose a 1 lakh rupee fine on a particular TV channel, and they are they will be profiting on say 10 lakhs, so it doesn't matter at all. So the penalties should be very stiff. The channels should be taken off air for a period of time, and the people who appear on the channels who spread those that hate, they should be completely banned from appearing in all.
But Mr. Majumdar, as we go along, we'll discuss this further. There are very strict rules for television channels, extremely strict rules. But the point is, they still operate with some form of impunity. There are very, very strict rules of the Ministry of Information Broadcasting. But then, there'll be this whole dynamic of freedom of speech violation, which must be questioned, and also vindictive action. Deshatan Nigam, your opening comments.
Sanket, in fact, if you look at the environment, the hate speeches or whatever the fake news was going on since quite a lot of decades before, what happened in 2014, the other side also got a voice. The voice which was earlier suppressed, and there was a leftist and communist narrative which was already going on. I have never approved of the hate speeches, the kind of words which are being used today, nor I have ever indulged into it. But the fact remains, one has to see a very balanced point of view. And there are channels which spread fake news and hate speeches in a manner like with a smile and quietly also. So what is to be seen is the content, not and the manner both. And secondly, let me also point out, hate speech has not been defined in any of our penal laws. First, it has to be codified and defined. And secondly, let me tell you that the regulation is an evolutionary process. Earlier, there was regulations, then the concept of a self-regulation came in 2021 through ethics code. And now government is also mulling about, bringing it something in between self-regulation and independent regulation. Probably that some discussion is going on, and which I read in the media, and probably we'll be moving a step ahead. Are we there for an independent regulator or not? Or do we require such harsh
I think a
penalties
very,
or
very
not?
important point has been made by Mr. Deshatan Nigam, and Suman C. Raman, I want to come to you. He says that first of all, for the media, let us start with the definition. Define what is hate speech. Do you think that hate speech has been defined categorically? My feeling is that the Indian law defines it. You have sections and provisions in the law that define what is hate speech.
Sanket, with due respect, I don't believe that it is feasible or possible for us to define hate speech without leaving some level of ambiguity in any definition that we can come up with, which means that we leave the door open for the discretionary power of the authorities or the regulators. Now, the problem with quote-unquote regulation is that who will regulate? How objective is the regulator going to be? And in the case of so many institutions which are literally now supposedly independent but covering in fear of the government, one more regulator I do not see serving any purpose except to further parrot or toe the government line. So there is going to be a problem. This is not about purely defining things. This is about having a truly independent body. And if you cannot have a truly independent statutory bodies like even the Election Commission or the CBI or so many others,
how will you have
what is the guarantee that you're going to have a regulatory body that is independent for
Shivam,
for supervising
would you
hate
like
speech?
to weigh in, because you were the original proposer of a body?
Sanket, you said nobody wants a super cop, and of course journalists don't want more regulation. Why should they? But I think the water has gone above the danger level mark, and we cannot not have a body anymore. As you rightly pointed out, we have very stringent rules and laws against TV channels, news channels in the INB ministry. It's called the Code of Conduct, which the government has very strong powers, right? But one reason why the government doesn't use the power, apart from whatever political motives there may be, is because every time the government wants to use them, it looks like heavy-handed censorship. The INB ministry is coming down on TV channels. It will always look selective. It will always look political. That is why I am saying we need an autonomous, underline autonomous. CBI is not autonomous.
How do you ensure the autonomous nature? That's the point.
How is the Election Commission of India autonomous? They have constitutional autonomy, right? We need a hate speech regulator, not just for TV use, but also social media.
So a constitutionally autonomous media body. You see, think we need that sort of an organ, Kota Nilima?
You just 1 second, Sanket. You also rightly said that we have enough laws in the IPC to take care of these matters. But the volume of speech in an age of media explosion is so much that we need a daily regulator, a quasi-judicial body to take care of the complaints. It gets a complaint, it examines it, disposes of the complaint.
Correct. Kota Nilima, I want to know from you in your assessment. Yeah, Mr. Majumdar, I'll come to you. Ms. Kota Nilima, how do you ensure that this scale that has tilted towards what Mr. Kulkarni calls poison for profit debates? And you said that thank you for letting us know what happens behind the scenes. I can let you know a number of things. It is extremely normalized. I'm sure all our panelists over here who at one point used to regularly visit TV newsrooms used to sit in the August gathering in company of these Maulanas and Pandits and Dialabite, sorry to say, some of them ex-army men also, ex-servicemen, who are extremely normal human beings off air. But you switch on the camera and something happens to them. It's almost like an act. Kota Nilima.
So how are we going to have a regulatory body to control these kind of statements? Exactly my point. It can't be done. First of all, these are, as Kulkarni ji said, it is for profit of a certain kind, whether in kind or in other ways. And governments get to gain from these agendas because they divert and distract. So yes, a regulatory body which defines hate speech, it is necessary, it should be there, but I don't think it is going to be very successful. And I also wanted to talk about the structuring of hate speech. Now it is very possible. I mean, yes, it is a very nebulous idea. It's a very difficult idea, but our research shows that there are ways in which you can analyze. We do, for instance, anchor language analysis. We do topic language analysis in our institute. So there are ways in which you can identify hate speech, have markers, and ensure that the media doesn't cross them. Now that can bring certain level of autonomy and regulation to the concept of how to control hate speech. But I do not believe that this communal agenda, which is being pushed for years, and I'm sorry to say...
No, but Ms. Kota Nilima, here is the thing, and here I would want to come in and maybe ask Mr. Jaideep Majumdar and Deshratan Nigam. You see, when you say we should not have any communal agenda, are we saying that we do not debate anything along religious lines? Because again, that is restricting free speech. I may want to debate on religion, But I may want to have a civilized, in fact, I should have a civilized debate on religion. Who says that
But
you can't
Sanket,
debate
65%
Gyanvapi?
of a program, 65% of a program
It is
on
possible,
prime
it is
time, when lakhs of
definitely
people are watching just
desirable
on communal
and
on a day when
always possible
Yeah,
to have a civilized debate.
One by one,
price of fuel has gone 10 rupees. I mean,
Yeah, one by one, please. Yes. No, I'm saying what is the motive behind a debate? That is a totally different issue. How the debate itself should happen and what should be debated, this should be left in the domain of free speech. I mean, I may choose to debate religion, but how do I do it so that I don't spread hate? That's the point that is being made. Jaideep Majumdar. I don't think debating Gyanvapi is a problem. If it is happening in courts, why should we not debate it? Jaideep Majumdar.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and it is possible to debate religion or any matter without being hurtful to your fellow
Hurtful and
panelists.
hateful.
Sorry?
No, I'm saying without being hurtful and hateful.
And hateful, absolutely. So it is possible to debate. But coming back to one small thing about the regulatory body, it should be absolutely autonomous. CBI and Election Commission are not really autonomous. They should be absolutely autonomous. And the second thing is hand out exemplary punishment so that the others, no one would dare to repeat, what is happening in many of the channels today.
No, again, who will govern such a body? Obviously, it will report to some ministry. Then there will be this fear of government regulation. You see, it's not for the first time, Mr. Sudhin Kulkarni, that something like this has been spoken about. That, media should be regulated. Then media says no self-regulation. Self-regulation does not work. Another regulatory body. And then we keep going round and round in circles. Some ex-judge, by the way, there are organizations, self-regulatory organizations. But clearly they don't seem to be effective. And then, of course, media organizations are free to form their own regulatory body, which has happened. You've got a splinter group also. Then they have their own set of rules that suit them. You will never have everyone on the same page. Then how do you stop this hate? I would say, don't you think that eventually the answer is legal, a legal remedy? Define hate speech, take action against hate speech. Do you think the solution is, Sudhin Kulkarni, do you think that the solution is a policing solution or an ethical solution?
Sanket, the real solution is when the real regulator performs his duty. And the real regulator is the government, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which issues licenses to television channels. Now, here is a government that wants hate speech to happen, hate propaganda to happen, because there are two profits here. One is profit for the television channel, but there is also political profit to the government. And that is why the government encourages these propagandists to continue hate propaganda. And let us put it very clearly, it's not, we should in defining what is hate propaganda, in today's context, it is hate for the Muslim minority. That is what is happening today. And it's not just Maulanas and Pandits. It is the anchors. It is the other people. It is spokespersons of the ruling party who are indulging in this. And all this is happening. It's not that the Prime Minister doesn't know, the Home Minister doesn't know, the Information and Broadcasting Minister doesn't know, but they are letting it happen because it helps them by polarizing society.
Profit in terms of money and profit politically. That's the point that you're making. Okay. Shivam Vij wanted to come in and Deshatran. You see, government and what steps the government may take. There'll be a question on how the government brought back this rating system. I'm not saying there should be no currency to judge how effective or how much you are being watched. By the way, BARC rating is an advertising tool, not an editorial tool. Sadly, it has been made a function of your editorial performance. And also, a very faulty system has been brought back and superimposed by the government again. NDTV does not participate in BARC for these very reasons. Shivam Vij and then Deshatran Nigam.
Sanket, I'm glad you mentioned ratings because I was going to say that when we say poison for profit or hate for profit, I would like to underline the word profit. And it is not just political profit. Media is a business. And these channels, the reason why they have this hate is because whether you like it or whether you don't like it, you're going to be glued to the channel. You're going to talk about the channel and the anchor. You're going to see it in some kind of morbid fascination. Look what is happening. Look what he said. And you're going to be glued to the channel. And that's how the TRPs are going to go up, and more TRPs means more advertising. So now that we understand that this is for profit, we also have to see that the answer can also be in the form of hurting their profits. Advertisers on this channel should be shamed for supporting and funding this hate for TV, this hate for profit, right? Similarly, regulators could take action in terms of hurting their profits. I agree that the fines have to be exemplary, right? You can't just have a token fine. Unless you hit them where it hurts, they're not going to stop.
Shivam, you are appealing to the conscience of an advertiser to not fund and fuel hate. But
Absolutely.
sadly, it is so cutthroat, it does not work like this. Real life does not work like this, where an advertiser will only and only look at the numbers. Now, if you fix the currency itself.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that the TRP rating system also has to be fixed. It is fixed. The TRP rating system we know in India forever has been fixed, a fixed match, much like the Maulana Pandit debate on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Deshratan Nigam and then Suman C. Raman, one by one. Deshratan Nigam, do you feel that a government's accountability comes in to not re-continue something or continues with something which they know is faulty? You will have a fixed faulty system back, and then you will expect that everything will fall in place. Obviously, there are vested interests.
Sanket, in fact, we as a nation are known for our debate and Shastrarth Parampara.
Yeah.
And we have debated about truth, and nobody can stop debating in this country.
Certainly not, sir.
And we are a nation of questioning. And even in emergency, people question. And people question with all their might and power. So let me tell you, government, it's very easy for government to bring in a regulation and independent regulatory authority. But government is not doing so. They went for ethics code, self-regulation, and then finally an oversight committee which was there when the government comes into the picture at a very, very late stage. I can give a political spin like Mr. Kulkarni to the entire debate, but I would not do it because this is a kind of a different kind of a debate that we are dealing with. And I don't want to get into that kind of,
that there is hate directed at the Muslim minorities. That's the point.
No. What he said, first the Muslims in Jamaat-e Ulema Hind's Devband called themselves a second majority. They did not call themselves a minority. Now the hate speeches are from all across. It's not, against minority. And what happened to what was said about Mahadev and Shivling, if I show you the social media posts and what was said on
I agree, Mr. Deshratan Nigam, but here is a case of two wrongs making a right. Just because someone has, you take action against those motormouths.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Irrespective of religion. That's the point.
We have to, I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but correct picture has to be, put in your debate. It cannot be a one-sided debate. Right.
Can this not happen without spewing venom, without insulting religion? That's the point. You see, how did this all begin? Mr. Mazumdar, how did this all begin?
Let me finish.
This began
Sanket, let me finish.
When
first.
Provoked,
let me finish.
Spokesperson
Sanket, let me
Nupur
finish.
Sharma ended up saying something which
Sanket,
I hope she's regretting now. Deshratan Nigam and then Mr. Mazumdar.
Sanket, what Nupur Sharma said is a matter before court, and I rightly pointed out when the matter is before court, court will ask 3 or 4 questions. What was said, whether what was said was truth, whether she was sufficiently provoked or not, and the manner in which it was said. These 3 parameters will be tested in court. Then the intention would come out, because in a criminal law, intention is very important. Now, the problem arises because in our court system, we have a very poor system of compensation and damages. And if the compensation of system of damages and compensation was there properly enforced, if anybody who has been wronged, like you have in United States, millions of dollars compensation is given, the crimes, such kind of hate crimes, really will come down. So we have the provisions, but in enforcement by the courts, the systems, delay, the so many things go on, and hence the judicial reforms is intimately connected with your present debate also. So the present debate also requires the overall structural changes in the system. It's very easy for the government to bring in a regulator, let me tell you. But everybody will start shouting. It's a very complex choice.
Because the manner in which it will be brought in and the environment that we are in, obviously there will be questions raised. You're right.
It will be a very complex choice. It's a very complex choice.
Yeah. Sanket, see, I just wanted to go back to the initial point that I made about hate speech paying off. You take a Pragya Singh Thakur, you take an Anurag Thakur, you take a Kapil Mishra, you take an Anand Kumar Hegde, you take a Raja Singh. I can go on. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. They are people who, subsequent to the hate speeches that they have made, have actually ended up being politically more powerful, not less powerful.
But Mr. Raman, there are similar examples in other parties also.
No, there may be examples in other parties too, Sanket, but let's face it, without the ruling party's benign sort of neglect / blessings, this thing would clearly not be possible, right? Let's be clear and honest about it. There is a problem because the ruling party does tend to look the other way, if not actively encourage hate speech. Now, the second point, this is a point which I very wanted to make even earlier. Look, we are talking about a regulator, we are talking about anchors, we are talking about journalists, but there is a clear division in all these groups. You saw the Press Club of India elections, left-wing journalists versus right-wing journalists.
Oh yeah, terrible.
You have the journalist community which is divided. Oh, he is or she is a liberal, he or she is a right-winger.
Yeah, I mean, statements like Sanghi media, liberal media.
Exactly.
Very casual talk these
days. When you have a problem on that scale, it is naive for us to believe that we can get a truly autonomous body, because whether you're an anchor, whether you're a journalist, print journalist, whether you are a regulator, you are immediately deemed to be either on one side
or Mr.
the
Raman,
other.
Here is my point. I come back to the original point. I may choose to have whatever philosophy, whatever ideology, right? But can there not be some sort of agreement on congregation of ideas when it comes to not spreading hate? Let the law define hate.
But that is going to require a few extremely statesman-like administrators to come in charge of this organization. One last point let me make, Sanket.
Yeah.
This is regarding the, having been to the studios for many, many years. One of the reasons that hate speech often happens is that there is pressure on some of these performers. That is why you will see the Maulana and the Pandit actually exchange pleasantries after the show, or politicians from rival parties who would have almost come to blows on the show, and later they would be slapping each other's backs and saying, you know what, I can't be seen to be saying this. I know you're right, but I can't say it on air because my party people will get angry with me.
Of times.
That is the point. That is again a point.
In fact, can I tell you something?
Pressure on.
Can I tell? I'll let you into a secret. I know of a psychiatrist in Noida who has not named television anchors, Shivam Vij, but he says that there are many television anchors who come to him to say that I believe in something else, but I am being forced to a hateful line. And it's deeply upsetting.
Sanket, I want to know why they all go to the same psychiatrist.
But, no, because it is in Noida. And most of these channels are in Noida. That's what. It's very close to Film City also. That's
a great anecdote, Sanket. I think I want to make one or two small points. So firstly, those who are opposed to an independent regulator, what is your solution? Right? Waiting for the government to see the light of day is not a solution. It's not going to happen anytime soon, and by any government. Why will any government want to give up their power, whether BJP or Congress, or even if I may say so, even if Suman and I form a government, why will anyone want to give up the absolute power regulating media as they like when they like? The reason why I'm arguing for an independent, truly autonomous regulator, and I think it is possible if we fight for one, if we demand one, is precisely because we live in such polarized times. As you were saying earlier, Sanghi media, liberal media as we saw the differences of opinion between.
What are you called, Shivam? What is the label that you get?
One of those. So, but
Depending on the situation.
The differences between no, Mr. Nigam, I'm thinking you're talking about someone else. But the difference of opinion between Desatan Nigam and Sudhin Kulkarni that we just saw, right, is a reflection of the society we live in, and it will reflect. We get the media we deserve, we get the government we deserve, we get the politicians we deserve, but I think we can have a better regulator than what we deserve, a regulator made on the lines of the law of the land.
Okay, now
right?
I want to bring in Mr. Majumdar here. Mr. Majumdar, you see, in this case also of the spokespersons and others who went on a rant, you've got 32 people who've been named in an FIR. So you see, there is a legal provision available, even as of this date. There is a provision available to stop people from spreading hate, where the law can kick in and it can dictate what is right or what is wrong. Then you can of course fight in a court of law. There will be this flip side of vindictive action by the police, politically vindictive action by the police. We know that there is a problem. But do you feel that existing provisions are there which can then be applied to hate which is spread in the definition of hate as defined by Indian law on television channels as well?
In this case, we've seen that the provisions do
You
exist.
can't be an aggregator of hate. That's the point that I'm making.
The provisions do exist, but were they applied at the right time? No. It took a lot of protests from other countries, from the Gulf states, countries to actually get the government to act and to sack the two spokespersons. And by the way, I mean, they are national spokespersons. They are spokespersons of a party, of a major party. Why should they get provoked into, into hate speeches, into saying something which is hurtful and hateful to others? Provocation is no justification for hate speech. I think that has to be made very clear to everybody. And all of us are responsible for what we say. I mean, why should I respond? Why should I get provoked into something which someone else is saying? Then I am.
But here is Mr. Majumdar. Here is the reason why. Because some of the panelists over here said that it is profitable to talk like this because there is political currency in this. Mr. Kulkarni made this point. And I remember a few days ago, Mr. Pawan Kheda, and this may be his party line, he says that yesterday's fringe can become tomorrow's mainstream, and that is why it is profitable to spread hate. And he gave certain political examples. Because we don't have political panelists on the show, would want to elaborate further. So do you think that this profitability around hate, both in terms of money as well as political profitability, both you have to disincentivize it? How do you do that?
Absolutely, that's what I said. Like we should.
Very easy to blame a Nupur Sharma or a Naveen Jindal. What about the larger ecosystem?
Absolutely. So impose exemplary costs, make it extremely unprofitable for anyone.
But who will do it?
The regulator, the independent regulator, the completely independent regulator, which is the regulatory body, should not be manned by any officials, ex-bureaucrats or politicians. Make it a quasi-judicial body. Keep it completely independent.
Quasi-judicial body. Sumant Raman wants to come in.
What about making the channels liable? The owners of the channels, and I'm sure you have seen this, there are some channel owners who are pontificating about the prevalence of hate speech without realizing that a lot of it is happening on their own channels. How come they are not liable? How come it's only the anchor or the person who's actually making that speech? Look, at the end of the day, the buck has to stop with the owner of the channel who is allowing this to happen day after day. If an incident, if it happens once, yes, they may have been caught unawares. But night after night after night, when your channel is used as a platform for spreading hate and poison in this country, the buck stops with you.
Being loud, being emotional, and there's also being a little sometimes abusive. Can it pass off as a function of choice or style of presenting? That this is a style of someone to communicate, a form of communication. using a form of emotion to communicate and say the same thing. Somebody may want to say it smilingly, somebody may want to be angry or agitated and say the same thing. And that's where we cross that line.
Kate, we are not discussing here the style of communication. We are discussing the substance of communication.
Correct.
And it is a substance that defines hate. Now, we know how hate is being normalized. You know, as you yourself said, a judge gave a ruling that if hate is communicated with a smiling face, it's not hate. I'm sure that particular judge is going to be promoted and given a reward for this. So let us not delude ourselves into thinking that some independent regulator can change all this, because the independence of every single democratic institution has been compromised today consciously by the government of the day. The government does not want the media to be independent. The government does not want the anchors and journalists to have integrity. You mentioned an anchor who said that my views are different, but I am forced to say these things. Who forces that person? It is the Malik. And who forces the Malik? It is the government of the day. And therefore, unless the people become aware of what is at stake is democracy, what is at stake is freedom of the press, what is at stake is communal harmony, communal peace. It's only because the Nupur Sharma episode became the crescendo and brought bad name to the country itself that the government had to act. Otherwise, the government was not acting. There were so many instances when the media was being abused and misused. The government kept quiet because, as I said earlier, it was profitable for the government. And therefore, there has to be more and more protest from the people themselves that would force the government to either act, or when the time comes, the government removed.
Okay. What we'll do here is that we'll take a short break and we'll come back and take your closing comments and sum up what all we have discussed. I think this has been a fairly fruitful discussion with a lot of solutions that have come in. It's very, very important for the media also to reflect on what it has done and maybe change itself. Back after a short break. So welcome back. You're watching The Big Fight. We've had an extremely fruitful discussion where not a debate and not a big fight, but clearly in this case the big fight is against hate debates and hate for profit media. Just to sum up what all has been discussed, let's quickly take closing comments. Shivam, which will begin with you.
Absolutely, it is a very big fight we have here, the fight against hate speech, because in the name of free speech, people are getting away with hate speech. At the same time, we don't want censorship. It's a difficult problem to solve. My proposal is for an independent autonomous regulator, which takes in all the complaints, assesses them legally, a quasi-judicial body whose decisions can also be challenged thereafter. But I think we need to move towards solutions. We cannot keep saying that we have a problem here. These channels are not going to self-regulate. Yes, because self-regulation has failed. These channels do not have an incentive to dial down.
This Maulana Pandit nexus and this fixed match has to end.
Maulana Pandit anchor nexus.
Maulana Pandit anchor nexus has to end. Okay.
Anchor nexus.
Okay. Desh Chatan Nigam, your closing comments.
Yes, Sanket, this reminds me that I did exactly the same program of Big Fight with Vikram Chandra about 3-4 years back. And at that point of time, the conclusion was self-regulation. The unanimous conclusion was self-regulation. And I said regulation is evolutionary. So we are now today talking about some kind of regulation by an independent authority. So we have moved depending on the situation. Now, secondly...
No, I don't think there is a consensus on what Shivam Vij is saying though.
No, but everybody seems to be talking of...
As an anchor, I don't know what my position is going to be.
No, what I am saying, everybody is talking today of regulation. not self-regulation. That was the moot point that I'm talking about.
Okay.
Now, secondly, let me tell you, the debate and discussions have to be about truth and logic. The two parameters, the spokesperson and everybody has to remember that it has to be based on finding out facts and truth and logical reasoning. That has to be there. This is the basic point which I tend to follow. Now, for regulation, I feel there has to be first warning, then penalty. Without warning, you should not give any penalty because this is media and you have to give some kind of a respect to media. First, self-regulation through warning. If that doesn't work, then you go to the field of regulation. It's a combination of self-regulation and regulation both.
Okay. Mr. Majumdar, your closing comments.
I would say that we need a quasi-judicial body which has to be, there will be doubts. See, there'll be allegations and there'll be doubts about any body. But let us have the body first. Let us, have a judicial oversight and a parliamentary oversight. Let everyone get involved and let this body be formed. Let it start functioning. And then as we go along, as the gentleman said, everything is evolutionary. As we go along, things can be corrected. Whatever are the flaws, these things can be corrected. But let us have the body. Self-regulation has not worked. It is time for an independent, autonomous regulator.
Okay. Mr. Sudhin Kulkarni, your closing comments, sir.
Regulation has not worked and regulation will not work under the present government. What will work is resistance, not regulation, but resistance. Who should resist? The biggest stakeholder in the media are the people. The media is for the people of India. And the people of India must affirm their commitment to peace, to communal harmony, to national unity. And therefore, all those who believe in our country's secular fabric, they must resist. They must say no to these peddlers of poison on the mass media. The second stakeholder is, of course, the media itself. People like you, anchors, journalists. You are the media, and there are lots and lots of people in the media community in India who don't like what is happening, but they're helpless. They must speak out. The third important stakeholder are the legal community. Let the legal community, let the courts take action on some of the culprits. Send them to jail and see what will happen. It will be a deterrent punishment. And there is one more stakeholder, and that is people in the political establishment. Having been in the BJP for many, many years, I know that even people in the BJP do not like what is happening today. They do not like the fact that the government is allowing this hate propaganda to go on. They also must speak up. The entire political establishment, not just the BJP, but everyone who is committed to constitutional values must speak up, must resist. And therefore, not regulation, but resistance.
Okay. Interesting point. Ms. Kota Nilima, the last word.
Well, I believe the solutions are empowering the audience. That is something which our research keeps getting a lot of demand on what kind of research we are doing on issues, on programs. So I know audience are already empowered. They are already on to the game, sort of. Because for the last few years, what has happened in terms of pushing the communal agenda, increased polarization in their own ecosystem has exposed those people who have been communal agenda, which includes both the political parties as well as the media. That is number one, the empowering, which is continuous, which is something which is happening as we speak. The second important thing is I come from a print media training where there were rules about how communal issues were presented, reported. The communities were never named, for instance. So the assumption was because that would lead to a response from the audience, from the readers, because communication is always two-way. Even if the audience is just consuming news, it also has a response. Lakhs of people, prime-time debate watchers, have a response, and that response we are seeing on the ground in our extremely polarizing atmosphere right now. But to change that is something which has started with the audience. the media will lose credibility if it doesn't match this expectation of the audience that media must have no master.
All right, thank you very much. We've learnt a lot. I personally have learnt a lot from what you have said. Let's just hope that there is some sort of an awakening, because if it does not happen now, if we don't enter into self-criticism, and we are talking about the television media, then who will? And when will this nexus, this Maulana, Pandit, and as Shivam which says anchor nexus, going to end? It's about time it needs to end. Let us launch that big fight. Thank you very much. Good night and goodbye.